Welcome back for the second video in my series of top 5 choices in 9th Age. This time we're going to look at lords on gigantic mounts. This is a bit of a response to one of the comments on my previous video, where someone asked if I could please also do a comparison of the battle of the most bashy ones on gigantic mounts. So this is going to focus mostly on just combat characters with not a lot of wizards in there. And it's not really the point of being the most point efficient or being the most valuable for your army in terms of passionate, but just for the sheer combat prowess, yet also a little bit on how it can support your army or what it entails that you do take this choice. So for the number 5 in the top 5 of bashy lords on gigantic mounts, it's going to be the Chosen Lord on the Wasteland Dragon for me. In this entire comparison, I'm just going to omit main rulebook items, just because they're kind of the same for all of these. And it's mostly about the special equipment in the army, the special rules on the models that make this a top 5. So why a Chosen Lord on a Wasteland Dragon? You can give him a favor of a goddess. So in this example, I took the favor of Anadra, goddess of Wrath, to really beef up the bashiness of the model. So you gain lightning reflexes and +1 agility. However, everyone is going to hit you a little bit easier. He's going to go to agility 8 with this, and you're going to hit with lightning reflexes. So you're going to hit quite fast with quite a lot of attacks. You still have the Idol of Spite that you can use once for 1 extra attack value, 1 extra strength and AP, which will bring you with the Burning Portent up to 6 attacks at offensive 8, strength 6. With AP 10 from the Burning Portent, you're going to have multiple wounds D3 and everything at agility 8, which is quite impressive with lightning reflexes. So most likely you're going to hit anything in the game on a 2+, except things that have distracting and a very high defensive. And after that you still have your dragon. In addition, still you can take the Immortal Gauntlets and make your close combat attacks also divine. And then opponents also have to reroll their Aegis saves. So that's going to be 6 attacks, strength 6, offensive 8, lightning reflexes, agility 8, with AP 10, multiple wounds D3, and divine. So this is really hurtful. However, your chassis is only a dragon with 6 wounds, resilience 6. That is a good defensive stat, but for a model that you're paying over 800 points, I believe, for, that is going to have to be a general, because in Warriors of the Dark Gods, if you take a Chosen Lord on a dragon, it has to be a general. I think that is the main pitfall of the dragon in Warriors of the Dark Gods, because it's general only. So yeah, you do get a nice mount. You still get the benefit of the Weird Stone to negate the first hit in the game, so you're a little bit more resilient against cannonballs. However, if you put so many points into one model that can just be challenged away by a champion somewhere, I don't think it's the best choice in an army. In a one-on-one fight, this one is definitely a top contender. In the number 4 spot, I'm going to put the Saurian Warlord on Alpha Carnosaur. So this is also quite a popular choice. I think mostly also because in the army you can get a 5-up Aegis against ranged. You can get Druidism to heal the model. So that it's actually quite a reliable model, and a health pool of 6 wounds makes kind of sure that you don't die in one round. Also, you don't fly, so clipped wings doesn't have any effect on you, which is both an upside and a downside. The downside is that you can get way more easily chaffed. Yeah, but then about the combat prowess of the model itself. Here I put Shieldbreaker because, well, the Saurian Ancients book doesn't really have a very good weapon enchantment, I guess, for an Alpha Carnosaur Lord. However, still with some main rulebook items, you can get quite a decent performance. You could take a different one. One of these is going to boost it up quite nicely. So we put the Starfall Shard on and the Egg of Quetzal. The Egg of Quetzal gives your Alpha Carnosaur a breath attack, or well, the Saurian Warlord on top, so it's going to be at agility 4 instead of 3. And the Starfall Shard gives you Aegis 2+ against flaming attacks. So in the duel against this chosen Lord on the dragon, you're going to be very happy. Also, it gives you hard target 1. However, you automatically fail all fortitude saves. So you're going to be a little bit more resilient against shooting, especially if you combine it in the army with the 5 of Aegis against ranged and the Druidism. The reason why this is such a good model is mostly because of the Alpha Carnosaur itself, not even because of the Warlord, because of the 5 attacks at offensive 4, which is quite decent for the Carnosaur. At strength 7, which is quite high indeed. It being Born Predator, you have a +2 inch to your charge roll against gigantic or fly models. And yeah, what the Alpha Carnosaur doesn't have, what the regular Carnosaur does have, is that he's also Born Predator. Well, the Alpha Carnosaur is also, sure, cool. So any ones that you roll to hit, you're gonna be able to re-roll. Giving it a mini version of Hatred that lasts every single round. So these 5 attacks, they're actually a bit more reliable than you would think, and the strength 7, well, it's going to be reliable anyway. So you're going to reliably put out multiple wounds D3 on the targets that you're hunting. And the targets that don't have multiple wounds D3, then they're going to be probably stompable. The only downside would be, or well, the only matchup that you might struggle a little bit with is either Cavalry or Monstrous Cavalry, which is where the Shield Breaker comes into play. So overall, I think this is quite a robust choice. You still have Cold Blooded that helps you in the situations where stuff goes a little bit wrong. You don't have to be the general, which is a pretty major point for a model like this, because I don't think you would want it to be the general. All in all, I think it's a solid choice, and it's actually a choice that you could play in your army rather than the Wasteland Dragon, which would, yeah, it just gives away a lot of points if it fails, and also if you run into some Aegis save against Flaming, then Burning Portent is just not gonna give you any value. For my number 3 pick, I took the Vampire Count on Zombie Dragon. Yeah, I think it's a really cool model. I played around with it a little bit to see how it works, and I really like it. The thing is that it's a bit of a conflicted model, because you really want to use the potential of the dragon, but also the Vampire Count is your caster, or at least one of your casters. However, it's really good at staying alive. It has 6 wounds. It has, just like in Saurian Ancients, capabilities of restoring hit points. So you could say, well, I'll take a Vampire Count and make him Wizard Master, so that I can get Pentagram of Pain, I can get Arise, and I can get also the Rot Within. The Rot Within is quite an interesting spell on this model, because every time you cast it, you lower the offensive and defensive of target by 1, and you increase actually your own defense by 1 if you sacrifice, and it also works on your Zombie Dragon. So your Zombie Dragon is going to get defensive 5, maybe even 6, and well, couple that with distracting. A lot of enemies are going to hit you only on a 5+. So I think out of all the dragons, this is going to be, or out of all the gigantic beasts, this is going to be the tankiest one in some sense, because, well, if your opponent doesn't have any 2-hit fixing, like battle focus with a reroll, then they're going to be struggling to actually hit your gigantic dragon, which is quite funny. Von Garstein is, for me, a really interesting choice, because you get +1 combat resolution, and also because your Inspiring Presence range is going to increase by 6 inches. It also says that you reroll failed vampiric rolls. However, on the Zombie Dragon, you get a -2 on your vampiric roll, I believe. You could get through thirst on your dragon, but I don't know if it's that worth it to go to a 5-up vampiric roll if you can get a weapon that is just better. But the real reason to take von Karstein would be to take Unbreakable Will, because it is going to happen that you get 1 or 2 combats where you might lose the combat a bit, or you charge in support of some other unit, maybe some skeletons that you would expect would just win the combat by a little bit, but then the dice turn sour and you lose by like 3 or so. If you lose by 3 with a regular dragon, then you're going to take 3 wounds. If you lose by 3 with a zombie dragon, you're going to only lose 1 wound because you halve the wounds that you take from stubborn. And that is quite big on a model that that costs like 1,000 points or so. Preventing a single wound is going to be able to prevent 150 points of wound value. In addition, you're still able to get the Cursed Medallion. You can choose a character, champion, or a single model on the opponent's army list. You can reroll fail to hit and to wound rolls against the chosen model. This makes Blessed Inscriptions a little bit less interesting for him. I would still consider Titanic Might, maybe, to really make it interesting. Also, Shieldbreaker is just a good choice. Yeah, that's the Vampire Count and Zombie Dragon. You can also make a Blood Dragon Vampire Count Zombie Dragon for a little bit of a more potent combat monster. However, I think that the Vampire Count and Zombie Dragon and von Karstein helps the army a bit better. You can then even take Stormcaller for a -1/2 hit in a 12-inch bubble, which is practically your entire army. The next choice on my list is a choice that I only saw once in a tournament, so I don't really know why, because on paper it looks really good, and it's going to be the Pharaoh on the Shah Guardian. I think maybe just the way that people build Undying Dynasties lists shies them away from the Shah Guardian. However, if you look at the profile and the profile of the Pharaoh, then this is actually quite impressive. So please, Undying Dynasties players, point out to me what the trouble here is. But to me, what this looks like is a beast with 7 hit points in an army that can regain wounds, which is already massive. Resilience 6, armor 4, just like the dragons we had before. Defensive 5 is quite high. You're an Eternal Guardian, so when the model suffers a wound from an attack with multiple wounds, reduce it by half, rounding fractions up. So if a cannon shoots you for like 2 wounds, then you're going to only take 1. If it shoots you for 1 wound, it's going to be obviously just 1. If it shoots you for 3 or 4 wounds, it's only going to be 2 wounds. And with a model that is so expensive in terms of wounds, this is really going to be useful to have. The offensive output of the Shah Guardian is not really up to the same level as the previous choices had. It's only having 4 attacks with Lethal Strike and Poison at strength 5, so that is a little bit mediocre. However, the Pharaoh himself here is a bit of a powerhouse, I would say, if you give him Goldslayer. So Goldslayer gives you an extra attack. You're going to end up with 5 attacks at offensive 6, at strength 7 because it's a great weapon. Which means that you will strike last, but anyway, with the Agility 3 you were expecting to strike last after all. Your attacks are becoming divine attacks and magical attacks, and you gain multiple wounds 2 against any Aegis. So not only does your opponent have to reroll their Aegis, you also gain multiple wounds 2 against Aegis. And this is mostly useful against models that have some form of Aegis, so mostly the models that it works against to have multiple wounds. I think the only exceptions would be monstrous cavalry and large infantry that don't normally have too many Aegises. However, demons are going to be crying, and it's also against conditional Aegis, so if you only have like a 2-up Aegis against flaming, like with the Dragonfire Gem, you're still going to suffer from this. In addition, you can put the Death Mask of Taput on this model, and then enemy units in base contact with the bearer suffer -2 offensive skill, which practically raises the defense of your Shah Guardian to 7. making it so that any offensive 3 troops are gonna hit you on a 5+, any offensive 4 troops or higher are gonna hit you on 4+. Yeah, I think it's really decent for what you get. You don't have to be the general. You don't have to. Well, it's a model that you can still lose practically, and not suffer with your entire army as a consequence. I think you might have to build your army a little bit around it, and I think maybe the main point that people would present that makes it not that much of a good choice would be that the Battle Sphinx is already quite good. And a Pharaoh on Shah Guardian doesn't really bring anything more than that to the table. However, I always feel like 7 wounds Resilience 6 is more valuable than, I believe it's 5 wounds at Resilience 8. With Resilience 8, either your opponents do have an answer for it or they don't. It's a bit more rock, paper, scissors. I think this is a bit more of a universal tool with the 2 extra wounds. And a good armor save. Yeah, so that's going to be my number 2. Before we go to the first choice of this list, I'm going to go for an honorable mention. This is going to be the Goblin King on Gargantula. So this is not necessarily the most killy one. However, I do think it brings a lot of good stuff to the table. So Gargantula in itself is a pretty decent monster with 8 hit points. Resilience 6, you have armor 3+, or 4+. And you have 8 attacks from the Gargantula at strength 5. You have 1 attack with Venomous Fang that does D3 or D3 plus 1 wounds if it manages to go through. So in addition to practically a crush attack, you have 7 more attacks. And you're stubborn. Stubborn only on discipline 6, I believe, normally for the Gargantula. If you put a king on it, it's going to be stubborn on discipline 8. Yeah, once again, I would just field it with Shieldbreaker or just a regular great weapon. There's not really a really interesting upgrade for the Goblin King in the book, I find. However, what is worth to consider is the Goblin King becomes a forest goblin if you take this upgrade, or you have to take the Forest Goblin upgrade. So you get poison attacks. With paired weapons, you're going to go to 5 attacks. You're going to have poison on your 5 attacks with Shieldbreaker. So it's going to be more likely that you will actually get a wound through with poison. Yeah, the Gargantula is just a really solid beast. I think I would even pay like 700 points for this. I don't know how much it actually is at the moment, but it's a really good pick. And my number 1 pick is going to be the High Prince on Ancient Dragon. So this has multiple reasons. First of all, he doesn't have to be a general, so you don't have to lose a lot of points when your dragon gets shot out of the sky. Second of all, well, it's a dragon, it flies, and it has quite a decent fly move. It has a fly advance of 7 inches, which is quite decent, meaning that it can go quite far, and chaffing it is quite a problem. You do get quite a big base though, so, well, it makes chaffing even more difficult. However, getting charged is also easier. Third reason would be that getting charged is not necessarily bad with this model, because you have the Nova Flare. So once in the game, you can allow yourself to just get charged by practically anything, because you're going to be counting as charging. You're going to count as charging with a model that starts off with 4 attacks. However, with Queen's Cavalier, you're going to get Devastating Charge plus 1 attack and fear. And with the Nova Flare itself, you're going to get Devastating Charge plus another attack and Lethal Strike, and your attacks become Divine attacks and Magical attacks. Yeah, so in the end, you're going to end up with 6 attacks at offensive 7 with lightning reflexes at strength 6 that are Lethal Strike, Divine, with AP3. AP3 is going to be a bit of a downer here. However, I mean, you can just position this guy anywhere, except for in front of the most killy things in your opponent's army, probably. And even then, you still have an Ancient Dragon underneath. I mean, this dragon has 8 hit points, which is massive. for a dragon. He comes with 6 attacks, offensive, defensive 6, so enemies are gonna only hit you on 4+. We were looking at this the zombie dragon with offensive, defensive 4, and we said that through magic you can get him to offensive, defensive 6. This one already starts with it, so that's no biggie. 6 attack, strength 7, which is massive, and agility 3 is still decent. I mean, if you use the Nova Flare, also your dragon is going to go to agility 4, striking before a lot of rank and file. The Star Metal Alloy is still an enchantment you can get, and then the Bear's model, the first time it suffers an unsafe wound from an attack with multiple wounds, the number of wounds is halved, rounding fractions up. It's not as good as some of the other enchantments that work all the time. However, for the single cannon that's going to shoot at you, you are going to limit the damage output a bit. Yeah, so this is going to be my number 1 pick, just for the sheer combat prowess that it has. I don't necessarily know if it would win in a 1v1 fight versus any of the other choices. However, the idea that, well, if you charge it, you're still gonna practically get charged by it once. That is really, really massive to me. In combination with it not having to be a general. So probably the Chaos Wasteland Dragon Lord is gonna have a higher damage output. Well, it's just a dragon that's a little bit less killy in the Wasteland Dragon. But the Lord is definitely more killy if he doesn't face something with an Aegis against fire. However, this prince, I mean, he's just so reliable, and he doesn't have to be your general, which is to me a very big thing there. Because you can even, in the worst case, you can still sacrifice this guy and not bleed too many points. It's going to be close, like 900 points and not like 1200 points. Yeah, with that I would like to finish the video. I must say this was quite a hard one to decide on which was going to be the best. However, I think I did a bit of a decent job. I think that the Eye Prince on the Asian Dragon, it's just with 8 wounds, it's really a tough piece to get down. And one thing that I didn't mention yet even is that you can pair it up with a Master of Canray Tower, making Druidism your attribute for all your spells. So you can get some pretty reliable healing going on. And with 8 wounds, this model is not going to go down in 1 round, so you're going to be able to heal it up effectively, which is another advantage that it has over the Chaos Dragon. And then there's the Highborn Elf hereditary spell, which is completely bonkers on this model. Yeah, with that I would like to end. Hope you enjoyed it, and next week we'll do another top 5.